Well, you've been creating lots of models. There's a chapter in here, I think it's the 13th chapter, talking about Minsky. And how did you see it coming?
I was originally a very strict believer in neoclassical economics as a first-year student, and then I had a transforming experience in my first year, and I thought, this is nonsense. The theory doesn't hold together. So I've been critical for a long, long time, but a lot of people who are critical of economic theory become rabidly anti-capitalist and join socialist movements and stuff like that, and to me that appeared to be swapping one religion for another. So I was reading widely in history of economic thought, trying to find a foundation that worked overall, and I read Minsky's work in the mid-80s, and I thought that really, to me, brings together the whole, both positive and negative aspects of capitalism in a realistic framework. And I decided from that stage on I'd make my academic work to be putting Minsky's model in a mathematical framework, because, as you might know, he attempted to build a mathematical model himself back in 1957. It went nowhere. It was based on Hicks's trade cycle model, and he pretty much abandoned mathematical modelling and built the verbal model. And I could see a way to take that verbal model and give it a mathematical foundation, which is much richer than the Hicks model he used. So I worked on Goodwin's work, his growth cycle model from 1967, and I took that as a foundation and simply added in the fact that people borrow money to invest during a boom and then have to repay part of that debt during a slump. And what I got out of the dynamics of that was a possibility to converge to an equilibrium, but equally to diverge into a breakdown where you have a series of cycles where debt ratchets up over time, and then finally you take on so much debt that the economy can't recover and you have a breakdown. And that's what I modelled back in 1995.
What was it inside your model or inside the vision that's represented in your model that said the alarms go off now?
Yeah, the vision was certainly Minsky's basic vision to say, if you're going to have a model of capitalism, your model must be able to generate a depression as one of its potential states, because capitalism has had depressions in the past. So if you can't model that, you're not modelling capitalism. So that's always been my framework. And the essential part of Minsky's vision was the role that private debt plays in this financial cycle, largely inspired more by Fisher than by Keynes. So that foundation argued for the importance of the level of private debt to income, and seeing how during a boom you take on debt grows faster than income, during a slump more slowly. Is there a tendency for that to cycle up over time? So in 2005 I got asked to do an expert witness case for a predatory lending case. And in writing the report, I had to look at the debt to GDP ratio. So I hadn't looked at the data for at least 5 or 6 years. I took one look at the ratio, its rate of growth, and I thought, holy hell, it's growing exponentially. There has to be a breakdown coming at some point. Someone has to raise the alarm, and at least in Australia, I'm probably that somebody.
Were you raising the alarm at that time about the Australian data, or about the American data, or OECD? What was the nature?
Australian data followed 5 minutes later by American.
Okay.
Because when I was doing the case, it was using an Australian case. I had to look at the Australian data, and I wrote this. I remember it very vividly. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning in Perth. I was writing this thing, and I wrote a line saying, debt to GDP ratios have been rising exponentially in this country. And because I was going to be the expert rather than the barrister, I couldn't rely upon hyperbole. So I had to go, I'll go check the data, and it won't be quite exponential, but it'll be rising, and I'll have to attenuate what I wrote a bit. So it took me a while to combine the monthly data for debt with the quarterly data for GDP. I think about 3 o'clock in the morning, because I was running behind schedule on this court case. And I plotted the data, and I just about collapsed because it was perfectly exponential. And I thought, well, that's the Australian. What's the American going to look like? So I dived across to the flow of funds data, downloaded that, plotted it. It wasn't quite as steep, but it actually reached a higher level. And I thought, we're both on a path of collapse. This is going to be global. And I've got to really raise the alarm, not just locally, but internationally.